Quite an interesting conversation with Xiao He, who's a specialized humanoid service robot stationed at the help desk at the media center where the summit is being held. Meanwhile, we're tracking some key developments even as leaders from across 24 countries are gathering in Tianjin. Yes, the highly anticipated bilateral between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping has concluded. The Indian Prime Minister has stressed that an environment of stability in ties, and he's also announced the resumption of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, which we've just seen take place a couple of months back. He has stated that relations should be built on trust, respect and resilience, and has also congratulated China for hosting a successful SCO Summit. He has confirmed that progress is taking place as far as border management is concerned, and has announced that direct flights will also resume soon. Meanwhile, the Chinese president, welcoming the talks, has stated that it was a pleasure to meet Prime Minister Modi, noting that the international situation is fluid and chaotic, and has highlighted that China and India, two ancient civilizations and the world's two most populous nations, share a historic responsibility for the well-being of their people. He later added that this year marks the 75th anniversary of China-India diplomatic relations, and that both nations need to handle their relationship from a strategic long-term perspective as well. This meeting carries added weight, especially amid global trade tensions triggered by Washington's tariffs and strains the India-US ties that have come to light as well. Modi's visit also follows Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's trip to India, which paved the way for restoring flights, updating air services and easing visas. What's interesting is that this is Modi's first visit to China since 2018, while Xi last visited India in 2019. He was in Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu. Relations have been long strained by the standoff that had taken place in Ladakh, the Galwan clashes in 2020. They have improved after disengagement at Demchok and Depsang in October 2024. The leaders also met in Kazan last year on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. Meanwhile, we're also learning that Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has departed for China to attend the SCO Summit and hold meetings with his Chinese and Russian counterparts on the sidelines. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast today is Professor Jim Rice. He's a professor of international law. He's joining us from the Philippines. We also have with us Colonel Sanjeet Sirohi, international relations and defense expert, joining us from New Delhi. And we also have Gerard Al-Fil. He's a financial expert joining us from Dubai. I'd like to go across to Colonel Sirohi first, and I'd like to ask you that we are seeing some sort of headway being made in the economic sphere as far as India-China ties are concerned. But should India approach China with caution, considering the fact that we've seen a lot of military build-up take place along the border? Villages have been cropping up. Satellite images of these villages have come to light as well. China is still renaming places located within India's sovereign territory. It still occupies Aksai Chin.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me for such an distinct, important debate and discussion. Now, let me tell you, what you are saying is absolutely correct. We, as Indians, we must be very cautious as far as China is concerned militarily, because improving the economic ties, improving trade relations, Mansarovar Yatra, starting the flight, everything is okay. And seeing the present situation where American administration has imposed 50% tariff on India, India has the right choice now to go and diversify its export, maybe to China or any other country, especially Central Asian countries which are part of the SCO. Now, as far as your question is concerned regarding militarily, I always say that you should not trust China as far as the military thing is concerned, because you never know. We have seen a lot of incidents. We have seen Doklam, we have seen Galwan, and we have seen other places where a lot of skirmishes take place. Then there are names are being changed in Arunachal Pradesh. Then there are a lot of incursion take place in Ladakh and eastern Ladakh, and even in Arunachal Pradesh. So I think, and a lot of disengagement has taken place, but demilitarization has not taken place. Presently, also, India has got about 50-60,000 troops which are deployed on the LSE, and it is eyeball to eyeball contact. So although we must improve our relations with China, economical relations, geopolitical relations, other things, keeping the present scenario, what is happening in the world. But as far as the military is concerned, we have to be very, very cautious, and we have to keep preparing ourselves, because you never know when China will again start Galwan-like situation. Pia.
Absolutely, and I'd also like to rope in Professor Jim Rice into the discussion. We've, of course, been discussing the tariffs that the US has imposed against India over the last couple of months. They were first was initially 25%, that is now increased to 50%. There's a lot of bipartisan effort that has gone into ensuring and elevating the India-US partnership to a strategic level. We also cooperate a lot as far as the Quad is concerned. Other countries in the Indo-Pacific are concerned with China's aggression in the South China Sea in particular. Now, reports are coming in from American publications that Trump might not make it to the Quad summit. So how does it augur for India-US ties in the long run, especially with now India-China ties seeming to warm up a bit?
Thanks for having me on, Pia. First of all, I'd just like to say that I completely agree with Colonel Sanjit. I think he's absolutely right with regard to military relations between India and China. In my experience, China really doesn't have friends or allies. China either has supplicants or enemies, and there's no real alliance with China. So you mentioned the South China Sea. Unlike India, the Philippines is a small nation. Although there are about 100 million people here in this country, the Philippines is a smaller and weaker country, and that's why the Quad that you mentioned is such an important alliance, which I note was established prior to the Trump administration. So I really would express my support for the Quad. It's important for us here in the Philippines for a number of reasons, including China's incursions into the South China Sea, or what we call the West Philippine Sea, in terms of depriving the fisher folk of our own exclusive economic zone, as well as attacking fishermen and even Coast Guard and naval personnel. So the Quad is very important, and all I can say is that I hope it continues. But in addition to that, living where I do, we are very near to Taiwan, and China has made several aggressive moves and statements against the sovereignty of democratic Taiwan. And if there were a war, the Philippines would certainly be sucked into that conflict. So again, I don't think I've really addressed all of the issues. In terms of the tariffs, I just want to say one brief thing. Yesterday, a federal appeals court ruled that most of Trump's tariffs are unconstitutional. And that decision was absolutely correct, because the Constitution of the United States, in Article 1, gives Congress and not the president the authority and the power to impose tariffs. Thanks, Pia.
I do want to take this forward on the last point that you've made. Though the tariffs have not been stayed, there's no stay that has been put on the tariffs yet. That does give the Trump administration some amount of time to make an appeal in the US Supreme Court that we do know is a little more conservative leaning. It leans more towards Trump's ideals. We know that there is already a conflict that is taking place between the Federal Reserve. There's this tiff between the Federal Reserve and the Trump administration that is taking place as well. So in light of that, as well as this sort of reset that we're seeing in India-China ties, could this be a wake-up call for the Trump administration?
Well, just to try and address the legal question, you're right. The appeal will go before the Supreme Court sometime in early October of this year. I would be astonished, however, if the Supreme Court were to reverse this appellate court decision. Clearly, a simple reading of the Constitution gives the Congress and not the president the power to impose tariffs. Trump has basically tried to use a pretext of emergency powers, but that too is bogus. And I predict that the Supreme Court will quash Trump's tariffs. Whether Trump agrees or not is a different matter.
Rather patiently with us. He's a financial expert from Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. Thank you so much for taking out time speaking to us live on NewsX, where we've taken a bird's eye view at the strategic situation in particular. Coming to India-China bilateral trade, China is India's second largest trading partner after the US. There's been a lot of discussion between Wang Yi and the Prime Minister when he had visited New Delhi just a while back, and now as well there have been murmurs that access to rare earths is what India is looking forward to, and meanwhile China is looking forward to access to Indian markets that were curbed after the Galwan clashes in 2020. If we consider all of this, what is the possible impact on the global markets that we can look forward to?
Yes, thank you. I just come back from Shanghai myself, and China and India have one thing in common. They both have to invest massively in the infrastructure. Let me explain. Going back to your point that China is one of the most advanced economies in the world in relation to tech, AI, robots, and so on. If you drive outside Shanghai in the hinterland and you see the province, there is still a lot of work to do, and the infrastructure is getting now a bit overused after all these years. I flew back over India and clear sky and looked down and see there is still so much to do in relation to roads, infrastructure, bridges, and so on. So both sides can work together. As I said 3 weeks ago in an interview here on your esteemed channel, that this is a shift when China jumped diplomatically on the side or to the defense of India in relation to the Trump tariffs. I think there's a momentous shift. I disagree with my previous speaker that India has to be cautious. No, this is the time where the gates are wide open. There were quite diplomatic and warm words from Modi at the SCO Summit now in relation to the border dispute. Let's settle this. Let's manage this. And in relation to Taiwan, Taiwan was part of China, is part of China, will always be part of China. There can't be any interference from the Philippines, which is far away from the Taiwan region, which is part of China, like Hong Kong. And well, what we see now here is blocs coming together at the SCO Summit because of the Trump tariffs. So they will come together because also the other countries like Tajikistan or Kazakhstan or any other of the former Soviet republics have to invest into infrastructure as well. There will be more cooperation between both sides. India and China are in a momentous shift here in history, and both sides are willingly taking this olive branch from each other.
Indeed, you've spoken that there are a lot of other nations, including Central Asian nations, that are present at the SCO Summit. And I wanted to understand from you, how would this summit help in providing further impetus to the BRI?
Yes, Belt and Road Initiative, of course, is now in its 12th or 13th year. And it's not just an idea, as often it is said, but it's also a shift in relation to economic integration between nations which are sharing borders, sharing common goals, sharing educational goals, sharing cultural similarities. And the Belt and Road Initiative, my 12 years in relation to, through Chinese perspectives, through Chinese eyes, is a baby. China does not think in years or decades. China thinks in generations. And this is a generational movement where the former Soviet republics, the Central Asian republics, are getting together and connecting already each other through trains. You can send now, trains are going daily from Xi'an to Germany, to Duisburg, our main station in the rural area in my country. And I also disagree with my former speaker, Mr. Jim Rice. China has friends. China has more friends than ever, more friends than any nation in the world, because Germany is a close friend of China. When I go to China, I'm welcomed everywhere, and we work together in relation to production, education, culture, and trade. So I think China is in its best situation and the best of the worlds you can imagine.
All right, I'd like to come back to Professor Jim Rice. I'll be digressing a bit from this conversation now because it's not just this bilateral between India and China that has taken place. Russian President Vladimir Putin is also in Tianjin. He landed earlier in the day. He's also expected to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping very shortly. This all, of course, comes as Trump is mooting a trilateral. Kremlin so far has remained cold. We've seen just a couple of days back strikes take place targeting civilians in Kiev as well, where 23 innocent people ended up losing their lives. How do you think the US administration is viewing this particular bilateral that is slated to take place very shortly?
You mean between Putin and Xi?
Yes.
It's difficult for me to comment on what this administration is doing, but I'm glad you brought up Putin, whose regime murders people in Ukraine on a daily basis, and obviously is showing no inclination whatsoever to any kind of peace or peace negotiations. So that's one aspect. As to how Putin and Xi will get along, well, Xi Jinping is probably the biggest supporter in terms of funding and in terms of materials, dual purpose materials to be used by Russia in its brutal war against Ukraine, democratic Ukraine. So again, I probably like to push back in a respectful way with my interlocutor here, but at the same time, I think he misspoke, because where I'm sitting right now in vegan Philippines, it's only a matter of a few hundred kilometers between here and Kaohsiung, the southern tip of democratic Taiwan. He mentioned Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong for 27 years. And during that time, I saw China break every promise that it made in the joint declaration that Hong Kong would be a free and democratic city. So many of my colleagues were arrested and put in jail, and the repression was, shocking and unbelievable. So again, I would say that the facts suggest that China does not have friends. It has never argued in good faith with the Philippines over its incursions into Philippine waters. It is just not the facts. Those are the facts. You can't refute them. And in 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled in the favor of the Philippines and against China, and then China has just simply ignored the ruling and continued its aggression against the Philippines.
All right, coming back to Putin, I'd like to go across to Colonel Sirohi, who's still waiting with us. There was an interesting conversation between Ukrainian President Zelensky and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday. They spoke over the phone line just as the Prime Minister had landed in Tianjin. Zelensky had highlighted the loss of lives that had taken place in Kiev even after the Alaska summit, where Putin stated that yes, he's open to meeting Trump again in Moscow. He's remained so far mum on a possible trilateral, though Ukraine once again has expressed that it is ready to come to the negotiating table. What do you think might happen next? Because Prime Minister Modi, as Zelensky highlighted in his message, could raise this issue with Putin in the bilateral that is slated to take place tomorrow.
Absolutely, Pia, that's absolutely correct. Zelensky has already spoken to Modi about 1 week back, and he has again spoken to Modi when he landed there. And the only hope Zelensky now has is that Mr. Modi will be able to convey whatever, because India's stand has always been a peaceful stand. And Mr. Modi, at an n number of times, he had told to world leaders and especially to Mr. Putin that this is not the era of war. We must sit together and have a peace. So, and after Peter Navarro has said that this is Modi war, so even Zelensky has also started thinking that it is Modi's war, and Modi is the only one who will be able to put some pressure on Putin, because lot of this 25% of tariff which have been imposed on India is because we are buying the Russian oil. So this point is certainly going to come up with the bilateral talks with Mr. Putin. And Mr. Modi, I think, will be very forcefully be telling Mr. Putin to do something about the war, because this cannot be carrying on for so long. It has already been more than 3.5 years. A lot of people have died, and still people are dying. So I think it is the right time, and I think now Mr. Zelensky has got a lot of hope on Mr. Modi that he will be able to do something when they talk bilaterally, and things may start improving as far as the Ukraine-Russian war is concerned. Pia.
All right. I'd also like to go back to Mr. Gerard Alfil. He's with us from Dubai. And speaking of the Middle East, this is something that I wanted to touch upon once before I conclude this conversation. President Putin will also be meeting the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, who is en route to Tianjin. This is in the aftermath of the E3 powers threatening sanctions against Iran over its nuclear projects. The UN has in fact also backed this ultimatum. So how do you think Iran is going to proceed from here? Because it seems that it is economically now cornered.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm here in the UAE, and the UAE government wants stability in the Gulf waters, in the Gulf region. Iran now has to reach out to traditional allies, that is Russia and China. Iran has now to strengthen its diplomatic profile again. I mean, President Putin also met President Trump, and President Trump is the leader of the free Western world. And going back to the court ruling on the tariffs, this shows that the checks and balances are in place in the US. There's no monarchy, as some people always say in the USA. There are democratic elections. There are House powers on Congress, and this doesn't change anything in the Constitution of the United States. Going back to the Middle East, yes, Iran has to show now its goodwill also to traditional partners and to shape its diplomatic profile, but also the Arabian Gulf states still wait also for an olive branch here in relation to stability in the region. Now we touched all the conflict zones across the globe. There are many, unfortunately too many. And we have to watch now closely at the SCO Summit what Iran says in relation to geopolitics. Economically, there are already close trade ties with Russia and with China. They will be expanded. They are on the expansion road. But we have to listen carefully what the president says here in relation to the Middle East, and the sheikhs and royals here in the Gulf region will listen carefully too.
All right, Mr. Alfil, I'd like to thank you for taking out time speaking to us. I'd also like to thank Colonel Sirohi as well as Professor Jim Rice for sharing their perspective on these really crucial developments coming in from Tianjin. Meanwhile, viewers, in Beijing, international scholars